All right, guys, welcome back to episode, I can't remember, but we're here and we're ready to go. A lot of things have happened this week. We're just going to focus on two stories, but the first one I really wanted to kick off with, because I think it's actually kind of a big deal and people aren't saying it's a big deal, is that Utah, which is so random, like why Utah?
Right.
They're banning social media for people under 18
Right.
Without parental consent.
Right.
So essentially the idea behind the law is it's supposed to put the power into the parents' hands, which I'm sure they already had in the first place,
Right.
to either allow or deny their kids from access from like Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, things like that. Now, they don't specify what app is technically a social media. They
Right.
just say, oh, it's anything that has over 10,000 users and has the ability to post and share content, which is a ton of websites and
Yeah.
apps. I mean, Amazon is technically that. So they would need explicit permission for each individual social media page.
Okay.
So it's just like, can I go on the internet? It's like, well, which website, and you're going to need to get all these different permissions for those things.
Right.
And it brings up questions, which I'm sure we'll get into, on like, how do you enforce this?
Yeah, exactly. That's question number one for me. Is this just something that I can lie about? That I can put the wrong number in there. So like, yeah, I'm 18 when I'm 11
Right.
years old eating syrup from my, arm. Or is something that I'll have to upload an ID, which you can also fake. Like,
So the parents will need to upload their ID to prove that they are the legal guardian or parent of the kid, and to show that they're above the age of 18 to be able to give the permission.
but that's my whole question, because if I'm an adult, they don't know if I'm a kid or an adult. So if I am creating an account, do my parents need to testify that I'm over 18?
Right. If you just say you were born in 1940, like, what does that roll? Like, can you do that? I'm not sure. Like, I read this on a few articles. They talk about how enforcement is the key issue going forward, which is like, duh. Of course it's going to be difficult doing
Yeah,
this.
I mean, you and I are both super on the fence about any kind of regulation. I'm not against all kinds of regulation, because people are not great. Unfortunately,
Fortunately, we need laws.
Yeah, exactly. You need laws because of the people that don't keep the law. And that's why every law exists, because someone ruined it for all of us at some point.
It's always that guy Jerry who ruins it for everyone.
Right. But for some things, I don't think that should be a law at all, because like you said, for instance, that like this law doesn't bother me on what it is. Well, you can't use social media under the age of 18 without your parents' consent. If it ended there, like you can't use it at all, period,
Just a
I
ban.
would be completely against it, even though I don't think that kids or teenagers should be on social
Right.
media.
You could ask the question, like, do you agree or disagree that the world would be better without TikTok? It's like most people would be like, yeah, I agree. The world would be better.
Right.
But should you ban TikTok? It's like, whoa. Now we're talking about a violation of the First Amendment. You're talking about free speech.
Right.
You're talking about freedom. You're talking about all these issues.
Well, yeah, it's if you put yourself or anybody in the position of dictating what someone else can or cannot do, then you're putting yourself on top of those people, above those people. And it doesn't matter how moral your cause is, you're wrong in your premise that you can do that. Nobody can do that. Nobody should be able to do that. So on this, and we had a conversation before we started recording this about, the aspect of this being, you said, if parents want this, if all of the parents got together.
Well, that's a democracy, right? Like,
Right.
if the majority of voting age people in Utah want this, it's kind of hard to make an argument against it, because that's what the people want. But we're not a pure democracy. It's, we're a constitutional republic.
Exactly.
And so it's the representative. So it's this guy, the Utah governor, Spencer Cox, signed this bill into law, and he got a sponsor. Who's the sponsor? Michael McKell, the Republican state senator who sponsored the bill. He told the New York Times that social media is a contributing factor to poor teen mental health, which, I mean, who can disagree with that?
It's the number one contributing factor to
And
it.
that the laws were intended to address that issue.
See, when I first heard about this, like 30 minutes ago, I was
Had a lot of time to think about
I
this.
had so much time to think about this guy. I had a whole half an hour, and I had no major problems with it. But the longer I think about it, the more problems I have with it, because this kind of thing, when people start being too moral about, why they're doing the things they're doing, it you look at the why you're doing it rather than what you're doing, and what you're doing matters. You know, you can't say, oh, I'm taking your right to choose because it's
for the greater good.
It's for the greater good.
The road to hell is paved with good intentions. But for me, it's more, this isn't necessarily taking something away. As opposed to just taking the decision for minors and putting it in the parent's hand. But I'm thinking the parents already had this decision in the first place.
Yeah.
Who this helps, if
illiterate.
if you're living with a grandparent and they don't know how to work your phone.
It's a different generation.
They're thinking like, I don't know how to put on a separate app that can restrict the time window of when you get on and when you get off. Like, I'd rather just the government put that decision in my hand. I can just like yes or no it.
Yeah.
But again, it's so messy to enforce.
So this is like the reasons why I don't have a problem with it, and the reason why I do have a problem with it.
Let's hear it.
I wouldn't have a problem with it because social media companies design these apps to be addictive, and these kids don't know about it. And we do have predators online that will know exactly how to attack children, and it's unprecedented. Like, it's not on the dark corners of the web, you know, like
it's mainstream.
It's mainstream, and these people have millions of followers because kids do not know yet, and it's biological. They do not have the skills yet, the human biological skills to discern if someone is a predator or if someone is very nice. Oh, that guy is so cool. Someone, you know, who is just creating Patreon accounts to talk to children without the parents' consent. Like, oh, you can pay for this. You don't have to prove that you are over 18. You pay for it, and then you go and watch these private talks that we don't have access to unless I pay and I get in to check. So there are things that are so incredibly inappropriate. And because we live in a culture that we need to affirm everybody's feelings so much, which we shouldn't, we don't know how to fight this, because you can't just tell someone, oh, you're being creepy, you have to stop. Because then, you know, they can just, I don't know, sue you or accuse you of being whatever phobic you can be. And now we have no tools to protect the children unless parents do what parents should do, which they don't always do.
Still should be up to the parents.
I know.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why I do have a problem with the bill. It's because if you are a good parent and you are checking on your kids' phones, you're going to keep doing that with or without a bill. I do not think that kids that don't have, you know, parents that are on top of them are going to improve at all. Like
Well, who is this for, right? It's for technologically illiterate people who need some help, I guess. Is that what it's for?
Well, because if your parents have no problem with you having social media, or if they don't care, if they don't
Which
check,
is probably a large
they
portion.
will just get in and say yes.
But then they have to provide a photo ID, and then it gets messy. Like, do I really want to be giving screenshots of my government-issued ID to all these social media companies that my kid wants to use?
Right.
I would end up probably saying no as a parent to half of them, because I'm like, I don't want to throw my driver's license on the web to all these random sketchy websites.
Exactly.
You know, but my kid is saying, oh, all my friends are on this, so I want to be on this. And
right. And
it just gets messy.
You mentioned a point, which is, you know, when usually this kind of rule happens, people go around it somehow.
They're going to have VPNs. They're going to have backdoors. They're going to have an app that is made specifically for this and just shows like that your IP is over in Maryland instead of Utah. This is going to happen. But again, this all comes back to enforcement. I'm not even against the idea of parents having the ability to choose.
Right.
I just don't like the government getting involved in this and forcing a private company to do something. Right.
I feel like a lot of the discussions that I have with people that are pro laws like this or any kind of regulation, really, we disagree, not because we think differently about the issue, because I do think that social media is the devil for kids. Like, they are so messed up because of it, because they see these people that don't live real lives, that record everything, that they're paid to look a certain way. They don't even really look like that. Like, these kids want to look like Kylie Jenner, like Kylie Jenner.
Right.
And
some
not
want
even
to look like Caitlyn Jenner.
I know a lot of them. And not even Kylie Jenner looks like Kylie Jenner. Like, they have so many procedures. And these kids look at themselves and they don't like themselves because their life doesn't look like what they see online, which is not real. So I agree that social media is bad for kids. I don't disagree. My disagreement, the point that I'm going from, is I don't think should be, like you said, the place of the government to decide what you can do. You are a parent. Do your job. you know?
Or don't, and the kid will unfortunately suffer the consequences.
Right.
But that's free will. But the thing about it is, the reason I think this is such a big deal is Utah's the first through the gate with this.
Right.
But they're going to encounter all these issues. There's going to be technological issues, enforcement issues, legal issues, and parents will be going to meetings, and they'll be going to, I don't know what kind of. What do they have on Parks and Rec where they have like these town halls?
Oh, the city hall meetings, the
going,
hearings, yeah.
They'll probably be going to all these different city hall meetings and talking about it. And then other states will all be watching and saying, okay, well, if we want to do this, we'll maybe do this differently, or we'll, so it will evolve the way legislation does. I thought it was interesting here. There's a part here I wanted to specifically talk about. Several states have sought to enact guardrails for young social media users. Lawmakers in Connecticut and Ohio have put forward measures to require parental permissions for users younger than 16.
Which makes more sense, actually.
Lawmakers in Arkansas and Texas have also introduced bills to restrict social media among minors under 18, with the latter aiming to ban social media accounts for minors entirely. California enacted a measure requiring social media networks to enact the highest privacy setting for users under 18. So there are different states testing out kind of different watered down versions of this, but this is the first being like, no, anyone under 18, parents have to sign off on it. It's like, okay, how do they do that? And you can read the bill. It goes into that. It's very lengthy.
Right.
But there's just a lot of complications with this.
Right.
Overall, I'd give this bill like a D+.
I mean, this is not a hill that I would die on. Like, it's not a bad... The bill is not trying to enforce something bad. You know, my problem is that the bill exists in the first place. But I don't think it's trying to do something that it will hurt anybody. My other fear is that it opens the door for other bills of this kind that will be like, whoa. Like, that's not something that I agree with.
That will be egregiously infringing on your freedoms.
Right. So, you know, I always fear because every time that the government asks you for a hand, they end up taking your whole body. Not even the arm, your whole body. So
and then you got to pay taxes on that body.
That is already
like, wait a
yours.
minute.
So, you know, my problems with these laws is just... I don't trust the people that make them.
That's a good one.
As much as I don't trust the people that run those companies, these social media places, because they're all people. You know, they're always going to take whatever they want to take and be self-interested. The government is not trying to do what's best for you. They're trying to do what's best for themselves. Even if the people that actually, you know, wrote the law, like the bill, they're well-intended, there's problems with good intentions. You know, first of all, you're not the only one keeping it. You know, you involve everybody and everybody has a different interest. So even if you're good-hearted, you're just like, oh, I just want to protect parents. It's not even your place to do that. And you just would have to accept that. But also you open a place for other people to take your bill and take advantage of it and do things that you did not even intend to do with that. So it's a dangerous, dicey thing to do, to just let the government act like a parent. You should act like a parent if you're a parent.
Act like a parent if you're a parent. It sets a dangerous precedent. Michael McKell and who's this other guy? Spencer Cox. Like, come on, Spencer. Look at Spencer over here. He's like, meh. Can we do one more? We have time for one more?
Yeah.
All right. So the second story here, really interesting. This is going to come as a shock, but also a shock to no one.
Yeah.
Becoming disabled by choice, not chance. Transabled people now feel like imposters in their fully working bodies.
I want to Google this. Okay, can you look this up? How is it called? Like decades ago. There is a name.
There is. It's called, so the syndrome that I think you're referring to is Munchausen. Munchausen syndrome. So it's the fictitious disorder imposed on self.
So there is that, and there's also the people that think the part of their body doesn't belong to them.
That's exactly what this is, though. Well, I mean, that's
something else.
Oh, you're right. Okay, so that's what happened here.
So this is a group to the two of them.
Right, and so let's be precise with our words here.
Right.
This is from the National Post. It's an article that's published, my goodness, back in 2015. So this has been around for a little while. I think it was just originally in the fringes of the internet,
right,
and no one really heard about it,
right,
unless you happen to stumble upon it. But now it's becoming like mainstream household discussion. But here's someone in Ottawa. His goal was to become transabled.
My gosh.
People like Jason, this guy here, have been classified as transabled, feeling like imposters in their bodies. Their arms or legs are in full working order. We define transability as the desire or need for a person identified as able-bodied by other people to transform his or her body to obtain a physical impairment. When he cut off his right arm with a very sharp power tool, a man who now calls himself One-Handed Jason lets everyone believe it was an accident.
This is a mental illness.
Yeah, but he had for months tried different means of cutting off and crushing his limb that never quite felt like his own.
That's it. That's the thing.
Training himself on first aid so he wouldn't bleed to death, even practicing on animal parts sourced from a butcher.
What?
Quote, my goal was to get the job done with no hope of reconstruction or reattachment, and I wanted some method that I could actually bring myself to do. The person could want to become deaf, blind, amputee, paraplegic. It's a really, really strong desire. Researchers in Canada are trying to understand how transabled people think and feel. Clive Baldwin, a researcher chair in the narrative studies who teaches work, blah, 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 has interviewed 37 people worldwide who identify as transabled. It's a lot of people, 37 people.
Yeah.
I mean, that would take a full week just to get through all those interviews. Most of them are men. About half are in Germany or Switzerland. What is it about Germany or Switzerland?
I don't know.
But he knows a few in Canada. Like, oh yeah, I know a guy in Canada. Most crave an amputation or paralysis, though he has interviewed one person who wants his penis removed.
Oh my gosh.
Another wants to be blind.
Oh my goodness.
Many people...
Use a blindfold. The heck are you talking about?
Many people, like One-Hand Jason, arrange accidents to help the goal. One dropped an incredibly heavy concrete block on his legs and attempt to injure himself so bad an amputation would be necessary.
Oh my God.
But doctors saved the legs. He limps, but it is not the disability he wanted. I can't laugh. Don't laugh. One day this is going to become so mainstream, they're going to look back and cancel us. You know this is going to happen.
There's no way that this was written.
One thing is like, it's not what I wanted.
Whoever wrote this knew exactly what they were.
The transabled are very secretive and often keep their desires to themselves. Stop. Well, you're making me laugh now. Baldwin says one 78-year-old man told Baldwin he lived with the secret for 60 years and never told his wife. Some of his study participants do draw parallels to the experiences many transgender people express of not feeling like they're in the right body. So here's what's interesting. It reminded me of this Munchausen disorder or Munchausen syndrome. This is from the Mayo Clinic. This is a real thing that they've diagnosed people with. Munchausen syndrome is when someone tries to gain attention or sympathy by falsifying, inducing, or exaggerating an illness.
Right.
They lie about the symptoms, sabotage medical tests, and harm themselves to get the symptoms. So my question is, how are you discerning between someone who, quote unquote, feels like they're in the wrong body versus someone who just wants attention or empathy?
Or, there is another syndrome. I don't know the name of it, but you feel like a part of your body doesn't belong to you. This is not a new thing, but we would treat it differently. Because if you feel like your arm doesn't belong to you, there's something wrong in your head. Like, that is not normal. But when we start calling things like, oh, you just have a different mind and we need to accept it and cater to you, so we will cut your arm off. It's so cruel because it's not the truth. And it's something that will impair these people's lives and the people around them. And you're just feeding, an illness. It is like we treat depression and we treat anxiety by what they are. They are mental illnesses, and you need to we talk about it as this is how we solve it, or this is how we make it feel better. All these things that we go through, all these methods that you can try, all these videos that people make. But when it comes to people feeling this way about their own bodies, we treat it as if it's something great. Oh, you're just so unique. And that's why this is happening so much, because we give attention to people that are starved out of it. And it's so sad because they should be loved and feel loved. But this is not love. Cutting someone's arm or leg to make them feel special by being disabled, it's not only an insult to people that are actually disabled and wish that they would not be, but also it feeds a delusion that passes for love or a good attention for them, but it's not. It's just not.
So this is what's going through my head, because obviously I'm not transabled. I've never
Nobody is.
But here's what's going through my head. I'm thinking there's got to be layers to this. There's got to be groups of people. There's got to be someone who, and we all can imagine an idea of a person who either exaggerates an illness or fakes an illness because they want to get disability checks or something like that from the government. Like, obvious economic financial motive there. That's not a disorder.
Exactly.
That's just someone gaming the system.
Yeah, you're a con artist.
Yeah. And like, you can completely understand that. I wrap my head around that completely. You can also think of a person who fakes an illness to gain something, not necessarily economic, but more emotional.
Yeah.
Like someone like that. That's essentially what Mukausen syndrome is.
Right.
I always think of Andy Dwyer in Parks and Rec. Yeah, Andy, he faked having his casts on for too long.
Right.
Because then his girlfriend took care of him for months.
Yeah.
She saw to his every need
Yeah.
for months. And the doctor knew he could get his cast off before. Anyway, so that's obvious too. You get special attention from the loved ones around you or something like that. So that makes sense, because then there's it's a social motive.
Right.
You have economic and you have social. This is saying something a little different. This is saying that it's not about the social motive and it's not about the economic motive. There might be someone who, regardless of what people think and regardless of what they could gain from it, they feel as if they shouldn't have the able-bodiedness that they do.
Well, but how do you know what their motives are?
You
how
don't.
do you know?
You have to take their word for it. And so I have a sneaking suspicion that it falls into one of the previous two categories I just described.
Right.
And that it's not this third category of saying, I believe that I'm a disabled person born in a fully abled person's body. Because if you really believe that, how much would you feel like you won the lottery, right? You're like, oh my gosh, like I felt like I should have been paraplegic, but now I have fully working limbs.
Right.
I mean, that would be amazing. If you really believe that, you'd be so grateful. You'd be like, oh my gosh, like I felt like I'm supposed to be paraplegic, but I have these working limbs.
But that's where the mental illnesses come from, because if you look at it the opposite way than what you just described, then it's the way that you look at it and it's the way that you think of it shows that there's something wrong with your head. And it's not something bad. Like it saying like, oh, you might have a mental illness. It's not saying something bad about the person. It's just saying you do need help.
Like, do you want to be factually accurate to help someone if you care about them? Or do you want to just placate their feelings and protect yourself?
Right,
Just say,
which
yeah,
is
do
what
whatever
you're
you want, man.
doing. Exactly.
So here's the issue. I think if someone is over the age of 18 and they want to chop their own hand off, I don't think that's right. I think that's crazy. But I also don't think that a government, through threat of force or any other type of violence or economic incentive, should prevent you from doing that.
But should you be allowed to go to a hospital and ask for that with no reason?
If they're going to a private institution and they're paying their own money and it's not government subsidized, like a government subsidized healthcare, they're not forcing taxpayers to pay for your own chopping of your hand off, then I think, why not? That's a private exchange between two individuals. My issue is that if we start normalizing that, oh yeah, some people are just disabled people born in able-bodied physical forms and they need to disable themselves.
Right.
It's going to eventually happen to kids.
Well,
it's going to be some 4-year-old who's like, well, I know a guy over there who's in a wheelchair. I feel like I should be in a wheelchair.
Yeah, I love it.
And they might
It's
not
fun.
know why they want that because they're 4, but they might want it because they I don't know, maybe they got attention from a teacher or something.
That is 100% gonna happen. And see,
You're gonna have an irreversible surgery.
This is how we go apart, because I do also, you know that, like, I do not like the government. The thing is, when I think about this kind of situation, when someone is when it involves with our psyche and involves our bodies, I don't think that we should treat it as if we're buying a phone. You know, like, oh, you go to a private institution if that you want to chop your hand off, because there's something wrong about it. So for me, like, there's the aspect of we're all humans and there are things, there are moral laws. They're just like gravity. It doesn't depend on our personal beliefs. You know, one of them is like, we don't murder each other, and we don't just punch each other on the face, or if you do, you get punched back. But there, you know what I mean? Like, those are extreme situations that happen, and society doesn't teach us how to be human. It socializes us, and it teaches us, you know, how to behave with each other on a daily life. But there are things that we just know as tiny children, you know, we just have, they're bigger than my personal beliefs, my religious beliefs. It goes beyond that. For me, for us to approve, you know, an adult cutting their own limbs just because they feel like it, it's something that, it's one of those things. Because I do think that we're the same species, and this does go on my personal belief that if I love my neighbor as I love myself, I can't allow that to happen, even if they really, really want to.
So what would you do if a friend of yours will believe that they were disabled, born in an able body, and they wanted to chop their arm off?
I would ask them to see someone.
And what if they didn't, and they just went ahead and did it anyway?
Well, I can't stop people from doing that, but one thing is for them to do it themselves, like that guy did. Like, he researched it, he did it at home. There's nothing that nobody could have done on that situation, and it's in your hands. If I am the doctor, then it's on me. I am the one with the tools. If I put on companies the right of just doing surgeries like this for no reason, because one thing is for you to get like bigger boobs, you know, like you're not getting impaired.
That's
by
one
that.
thing, guys. We're not going that far. Of course, we allow bigger boobs.
But if you're chopping something off, something that is important, like it's not an appendix.
How about
it's
a
an
reduction
arm.
of boobs? You feel like you were a small-breasted person born in a large-breasted body.
I feel like back pains are real. That's what I feel like.
Okay, so you're saying there's a medical functionality that could be increased by removing your breast. I understand, but you're saying if someone's chopping their hand off.
This is not that, by the way. Like, this is a completely different situation.
Right,
It's
there's
not...
no medical benefit of chopping your arm off. And so
and
you're just doing that because there's something in your brain that's different, and you're like, I want my body to match what's in my brain. So I think that this argument of transabledness can really run alongside parallel with the transgender issue. They're kind of similar.
Right.
Because you just saw someone wants to chop their penis off. We have a name for that now. We didn't necessarily in 2015 as much, but that's transgender.
I mean, maybe this guy doesn't feel like he is the opposite sex. Maybe he just feels like that penis doesn't belong to him, which might be something different.
Well, that's kind of to say that you look down and you're like, that doesn't belong there.
Well, but then it doesn't mean that you feel like a woman.
Sure. Yeah, right. So you might think, that doesn't belong there, but I'm straight. Like,
exactly.
You know
I
what
just
mean?
don't want it because I don't know. And that's my problem. It's the reasoning. Like,
so it's interesting. We're touching on a topic where we're saying, okay, someone can do something to themselves. You can't stop that. But to allow someone to go to a medical doctor and the doctor to have an actual procedure for that and say, I'll do it for you surgically in a safe way, in a safe environment. It's legitimizing it. And you're saying that sets a dangerous precedent of mass adoption.
Well, yes. And also you're basically saying, oh, I do think that person has something going on in their heads because that's not normal, but I'm going to go along with it.
Right.
What does that say about you? Like,
I think it's awful. I think that, like, I would personally have a very poor opinion of a doctor who makes money off chopping off people's arms.
You can make an argument about this, looking at, if you think that people should do whatever they want to their own bodies, even though you think that's egregious and that's against everything that you like, every cell on your body saying, no, everything. But you're not going to speak up on it. And you're actually going to allow that to become a legitimate procedure. You can apply that to anything, anything that depends on people saying no to something. It's like, oh, it doesn't affect me. It's affecting them.
Right.
That is not how life works. Like, society wouldn't work if we all as a community wouldn't agree on certain things that make us who we are. Like, the West wouldn't be the West if we just didn't let go of some primal instincts of, tribal and rebellion, and we just agreed, like, this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna be different states. We're all gonna respect each other. You can do you, but these are the rules that you cannot cross, no matter what you believe, no matter who you are. These are the laws. If they believe that, they can believe that, but I don't have to believe it too. I don't have to pretend that I believe it.
I agree. And I think that's the point of this podcast is we're seeing these issues and we're talking about them. And we're saying this is what we believe. You know, we're not saying any laws should be changed. There will be times when we say there should be a law about this. Or maybe they're saying we disagree with this law.
Right.
But I think with this, we're thinking this is sad that this is even a thing for... I guess 6 cases out of 100,000 people. That's Munchausen disorder syndrome. They did a study at the National Hospital Discharge Survey in 2013 where there were 6.8 cases, which, I mean, who is the 0.8? You know, but there were 6.8 cases. There's 7 cases of fictitious disorder per 100,000 patients.
Also, like, do these people, before they do get these surgeries, do they get to see a therapist for at least a couple of years?
I think they should see a therapist.
Right.
But my guess is no. My guess is if I wanted to walk into Baltimore Hospital right now, the hospital I was born at, and I wanted to get my arm chopped off, there isn't a single doctor in that hospital who's just going to chop my arm off.
Right.
So what we're talking about almost is a moot point because it can't really happen right now.
Well,
what can happen is if it involves your gender identity, because at that point, it's a protected issue socially.
But it became protected very quickly.
So you're saying essentially this could eventually happen with people who think they're born transabled.
If I affirm your identity, I know it's not a real thing. And I know there's something wrong with you. And I could help you if I just was brave enough to tell you that you need help and to not feed that delusion, because I can't convince you otherwise, but I can not feed your delusion. Remember that guy from Project, well, he's not Project Veritas anymore. He just left.
James O'Keefe?
Yeah. Remember when he was in college and he convinced the college to ban that Lucky Charms cereal?
Because it's offensive to Irish people.
Yeah, he did it as a prank and they did it.
And they did it. He said it's offensive to Irish Americans that not all of them have a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow.
I mean,
I gotta show you this. Did you hear about that guy in politics who's a white male? And
oh, yes.
He just decided that he was going to start identifying as a black woman. And he said not only is he a black woman, but this is part of his gender journey.
Right.
And I feel like modern problems require modern solutions.
Yeah, it's the woman. I saw this video, like this woman protesting for equal pay. It's like, women have to get paid the same way that men do for the same job. And this boy is like saying how men make less money on OnlyFans than the girls do. And she's like, we're not protesting for the same thing. I do not support that. He was like, no, but I make less money. These girls just have to show like a little side boob and they make so much more money. They're like, no, it's not the same. But it is, though. Like when you apply that logic to everything, it gets flawed. And then either you defend everything or you don't defend anything. And that's how we got to the litter box.
That's a good point, is that we went from calling it gender dysphoria and treating it as such to being transgendered. And then you went from having Munchausen syndrome to many of them possibly being like, oh, well, now that's transabled.
Right.
And so what gets tricky is how do you legislate a population that can change on a whim their identity? Because can I park in a handicapped parking spot if I identify as transabled?
Right.
It'd be like, well, you probably would still have to go through the legal hoops of applying for it.
Right.
But instead of actually having a physical test to prove it and a doctor, you would just tell them that's your identity, which means essentially as long as anyone's willing to fill out the application and see a doctor, anyone could probably have a parking, one of those things they put on their car so they can park. A lot of people are going to abuse that. This is interesting. I think this is fascinating. At the end of the day, this is a very, very small minority of the population that we're discussing right now. And they're exploiting a weakness in the armor of debating this factually, because as long as it's someone's subjective identity, there is no fact that can possibly debate that,
because it doesn't depend on fact.
It's in God. You're in God mode at that point. There's no way to even debate that in a public forum. In fact, it's at the point where to debate it itself, just to question it, is abhorrent behavior.
Yeah.
So this is happening in 2023.
Right.
What'll happen in the next 10, 20, 30 years? It's going to be so interesting to watch. I mean, there will be no shortage of entertainment. I mean, like I said, majority of the people aren't transabled. You know, even out of everyone who's been discharged from the hospital, out of 100,000 people, it was like 7 of them might have been exaggerating or claiming different things.
Right.
I mean, if you're one of the people who claims that they're transabled, you now are part of this like super hyper minority where you'll get people coming to your house with like wanting interviews, and you'll have,
and then suddenly it's not 6 or 8 anymore. Suddenly it's 200. And then this is another problem, because some people do have a real illness that should be treated, and not treating it. It's cruel when you ignore it. But then, well, like you said, when a bunch of people just like the attention, and they say they are the same way, but they're not, they make it the issue into a different issue. Now it's no longer about what your mind, it's going through, but it's your identity. And when I take that and I advertise it as just this is my identity, this is who I really am, someone who is completely normal, and then they can speak in a very convincing way, but because they don't have something wrong with their minds, they do not sound like, a person who should be hospitalized. They sound like a completely normal person because they just want attention. When you do that, then you take all those other people that actually do need help and you just blend them in with the identity people. And then now I can't even recognize which people should be treated for a mental illnesses and which people should be slapped and just say, like, step out of it. Like, this is not about you.
Well, this is one of those topics that you could probably debate forever in a lot of different ways, but we got to call it off eventually. So, yeah, I know this is a weird one. There's no way to intro out of it, but I hope you guys have a great week, and we will see you in the next episode.
Bye.
Bye.